$500 million, not on an aircraft carrier, not on a satellite, on a gun that was put in storage. A railgun isn't a metaphor or a fantasy. Two parallel metal rails, with a projectile between them, are charged with a current of several megaamperes, creating the electromagnetic Lorentz force, which accelerates the projectile to 2.5 kilometers per second. Mach 7. 7 times the speed of sound. For comparison, a tank shell, one of the fastest in conventional artillery, flies at 1,750 meters per second, and a railgun outpaces it by about 1.5 times. No gunpowder, no rocket fuel, just electricity and physics. The U.S. Navy invested $500 million in this technology over 15 years. It built 2 prototypes, one by BAE Systems, the other by General Atomics. It tested them. It refined them. It published spectacular videos. A flash, a roar, a shell ripping through a steel plate. Congress allocated funding. Admirals gave interviews. And then, in 2021, the program was shut down. Officially, due to technical limitations. The rails burned out after 30 shots. A single salvo required energy that the destroyer simply didn't have. The cooling system took up space that was needed for ammunition. The prototype was put into storage. 4 years passed. February 2025. White Sands Range, New Mexico. 3 days of firings. No press releases. No cameras. The information surfaced by accident. One paragraph in the annual technical report of the Naval Surface Warfare Center. Less than 4 years passed between lock it forever and urgently retrieve it from storage. Something had changed, not in the gun, but in the world around it. It's this change that explains everything else we'll discuss below. A weapon that had been buried as a failure was resurrected not because it had become better. It was resurrected because the alternatives had become prohibitively expensive. When TV channels show a missile interception, they show you the image. A flash in the night sky, the threat destroyed, the system working. They don't show you the receipt. One THAAD interceptor costs $15.5 million. A Patriot PAC-3 costs almost $4 million. An SM-3 anti-aircraft missile costs between $12 and $15 million, depending on the model. And what about the Iranian Shahed kamikaze drone you shoot down with that missile? $35,000. An Iranian Imad ballistic missile costs $250,000. This isn't war in the traditional sense. It's a cash register that works strictly in one direction. In March 2026, Marco Rubio said this out loud, not as a slip of the tongue, but as a statement of fact. Iran produces over 100 missiles a month. The United States produces 6 or 7 interceptors in the same period. The Secretary of State wasn't describing a military problem. He was describing an industrial catastrophe unfolding in real time. The 1-to-40 ratio between the cost of attack and the cost of defense isn't a tactical imbalance. It's a structural vulnerability built into the very architecture of the American missile defense system. February 28, 2026. Operation Epic Fury began, and the counter immediately moved in a direction the Pentagon doesn't like to discuss out loud. In the first 4 days, the coalition expended 5,197 munitions of 35 different types. Replacing these munitions alone would cost between $10 and $16 billion. 4 days, more than the annual defense budget of most countries in the world, but the most painful figures are those for interceptors. In the first 16 days of the war, American forces launched 198 THAAD missiles. That's about 40% of the entire American stockpile at the time, plus 402 Patriot missiles. In monetary terms, THAAD alone cost over $3 billion in just over 2 weeks. Lockheed Martin produces approximately 96 THAAD interceptors per year. At the rate of consumption recorded in the early days of Epic Fury, the entire American stockpile could be depleted in 4 to 5 weeks of continuous combat. Kelly Grieco of the Stimson Center put it bluntly, such missiles cannot be replaced overnight. It will take years. America didn't lose in the air. It lost in the accounting department. this has happened before, not on this scale, but the logic was the same. April 18th, 1988, Persian Gulf. The frigate USS Samuel B. Roberts hits an Iranian mine. The explosion tears a hole in the hull, breaks the keel, and the ship is barely afloat. The mine costs several $1,000s. To save the frigate, engineers cut out a 3-ton section of the hull and welded in a new one. The repairs took months. The response was Operation Praying Mantis. In a single day, American forces destroyed 2 Iranian oil platforms, sank a frigate and a missile boat, damaged a second frigate, and destroyed 3 speedboats. The largest U.S. Navy surface battle since World War II, triggered by a mine costing several $1,000s. The lesson was clear then and remains relevant today. Cheap weapons can force a disproportionately expensive response. In 1988, it was mines and Bog-Hamar speedboats. In 2026, it was Shahed drones and Emad ballistic missiles. The only difference is scale. In 1980, Iran had a few dozen missiles. Now it's hundreds a month. The math hasn't changed. The number of zeros has. History doesn't repeat itself, but it builds according to the same formula. 2 rails, a projectile between them, current. That's the whole principle. And its simplicity conceals both its power and its problem. When a current of several megaamperes is passed through the rails, a magnetic field is created. This field acts on the projectile, the conductor between the rails, with a force physicists call the Lorentz force. No gunpowder, no chemical explosion, no rocket engine, just electromagnetism accelerated to its limits. The result, a projectile weighing several kilograms flies out at a speed of 2,500 meters per second. Mach 7. At this speed, the projectile doesn't need explosives. It pierces the target with kinetic energy, the same force with which a meteorite leaves a crater in the ground. The range is over 200 nautical miles. Flight time to the maximum distance is less than 6 minutes. Now, the price. The HVP hypersonic projectile was priced at around $85,000 back in 2018. General Atomics is now quoting a figure of around $25,000 for its next-generation tungsten projectiles. $25,000 versus $15 million for a THAAD interceptor. The ratio is 1 to 600. The physics of the railgun haven't changed since 1981, when American engineers first described it. What has changed is the cost of inaction. If the railgun is so good, why was it closed? Because physics works both ways. The same force that accelerates a projectile to Mach 7 destroys the cannon itself from the inside. The first problem is energy. Each shot requires between 25 and 32 megajoules. That's roughly the amount generated by a large warship's propulsion system for several seconds at full power. An Arleigh Burke-class destroyer physically couldn't power such a salvo. It simply doesn't have that much spare electrical power. You either fire or move. Both are impossible. The second problem is wear. The temperatures and pressures generated inside the rails during firing literally burn away the metal. The American prototype could withstand no more than 30 shots. After that, accuracy dropped dramatically, and the rails required replacement. 30 shots isn't a combat system. It's a laboratory experiment. The third problem is cooling. Continuous firing is impossible without a massive heat dissipation system, and this system takes up space, which is worth more than gold on a warship. In 2021, the Pentagon summed it up. $500 million had been spent. The result was a system that couldn't be installed on any existing ship. The program was shut down without regret. Technology isn't dead. It's just waiting for a ship that hasn't been built yet. While America was shutting down the program, Japan was opening it. This is an inconvenient fact that American military publications try to formulate cautiously. October 2023. Japan's Acquisition and Technology Agency, ATLA, conducts the first ever firing of a naval railgun from the experimental vessel JS Asuka. The caliber is 40 millimeters. The projectile weighs 320 grams, and the velocity is approximately Mach 6.5. Modest by the standards of the American 32 megajoule prototype, but this is a real ship, a real sea, a real shot. June 2025. the Asuka railgun hits a real target vessel for the first time. The Japanese publish photographs. A tungsten projectile has pierced the hull. By November of that year, the barrel's service life exceeds 200 shots without degradation. The very problem that killed the American program has been solved, albeit on a smaller caliber. China moved in parallel. By mid-2025, reports emerged of a system with a 60-kilogram projectile, a Mach 7 velocity, and a claimed range of up to 400 kilometers. America finds itself in a situation that Washington doesn't like to admit out loud. The technology it invented and funded to the tune of $500 million is being overtaken by both its allies and its adversaries at the same time. Losing to competitors is unpleasant. Losing in a technology you created yourself is a whole new level of humiliation. February 2025. White Sands Range, New Mexico. 3 days of firings. No press conferences, no official statements. The information surfaced on its own. One paragraph in the Naval Surface Warfare Center's annual technical report, not a leak. No one simply thought it was important to keep it secret. Note the test sponsor, not the Missile Defense Program, not the Surface Warfare Office. It was the Joint Hypersonic Transition Office at the Naval Sea Systems Command. The railgun was tested not as a cannon, but as an electromagnetic launch platform for hypersonic research. This is an important distinction. It means that even officially, the program wasn't revived through the front door, but something more overt was happening at the same time. October 2025, a U.S. Army conference. General Atomics came up with a concrete commercial proposal, a railgun for the Golden Dome program and the defense of Guam. 3 power options, 3, 10, and 32 megajoules, containerized design, tungsten shells for $25,000. The role, terminal interception of cruise and ballistic missiles. Mike Rucker, the company's head of weapons programs, put it bluntly. The physics had always worked. They stopped not because the technology didn't work, but because it wasn't ready for use. The difference between not ready and not needed is the difference between a pause and an obituary. December 22nd, 2025. Donald Trump announces the creation of a new class of warships, guided missile battleships. Designation BBG-X. The first ship is the USS Defiant. The numbers are impressive. Lengths range from 256 to 268 meters. Displacement exceeds 35,000 tons. These are the largest surface combatants in the U.S. Navy since World War II. For comparison, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer weighs 9,100 tons. The Trump battleship is almost 4 times heavier. The weapons list includes 128 vertical launch cells, 12 launchers for conventional prompt strike hypersonic missiles, lasers with a power of 300 to 600 kilowatts, and a railgun with a power of 32 megajoules. But there's a key caveat here that's easy to miss. The USNI explicitly states that the railgun isn't guaranteed to be part of the project. It's a potential addition to the baseline design, not a standard weapon. However, General Atomics is already in discussions with the Navy about the railgun's role on these ships, as company Vice President Nick Bucci stated in January 2026. For the first time in 20 years, a platform physically capable of powering a 32 megajoule salvo has emerged. A 35,000-ton ship with an integrated electric propulsion system solves the very problem that killed the program in 2021. Railgun has finally found a ship, but the ship exists only on paper for now. The picture is coming together perfectly. Interceptors are too expensive. Supplies are running out faster than production can replenish them. The railgun fires shells for $25,000 instead of $15 million. The massive new ship finally produces enough power. The technology is revived. The platform is found. The problem is solved. A triumph of engineering over bureaucratic short-sightedness. Curtain call. No, the BBG-X is a project, not a ship. Design contracts are for 6 years. The first hull won't be ready until the early 1930s. Commissioning is expected in the late 1930s, possibly around 2040. The Railgun, if it ever gets on board, is at least 15 years away. The war with Iran is ongoing. Cost. Mark Cancian of CSIS estimates each BBG-X at $9 billion. The Congressional Budget Office put the cost at up to $22 billion for the first ship, comparable to a Ford-class aircraft carrier. The history of the DDG-1000 Zumwalt destroyer illustrates how ambitious programs end. 18 to 24 ships were planned, 3 were built, and each cost $5.5 billion, not counting the $14 billion for development. And finally, the entire modern U.S. naval doctrine is based on distributing firepower across multiple small platforms. One giant ship is one giant target. The Railgun is back. But the journey from warehouse to combat deployment turned out to be longer than it looks on the presentation slides. Here we need to stop and say directly what military analysis channels usually don't like to say. We don't know exactly what was tested at White Sands in February 2025. A single paragraph in a technical report isn't a briefing or a press release. It's possible the Railgun was tested not as a combat system, but as an electromagnetic launcher for experimental projectiles as part of hypersonic research. These are fundamentally different things, and the difference between them isn't disclosed in the report. General Atomics claims to have solved the railware problem, but there's a gap between the company's announcement at the exhibition and the independent government testing, which the marketing materials don't bridge. The Japanese demonstrated 200 rounds with verified parameters. The Americans have so far shown slides. The BBG-X could be canceled by the next administration, as has happened with dozens of ambitious programs before it. The battleship crusade has happened before in American history. Iowa was reactivated in the 1990s, then decommissioned again. Political cycles are shorter than shipbuilding programs. And most importantly, the Railgun is not a replacement for interceptors. It doesn't operate at high altitudes, where THAAD operates. It doesn't intercept ballistic missiles in the upper atmosphere, like the SM-3. It can cover the terminal defense layer, the last line of defense, but not the entire threat vertical. There is a signal, but a signal is not yet a system. Here is the final paradox, and it requires no embellishment. America is the only country that spent $500 million on the Railgun and then canceled the program. And at the same time, it's the only country currently fighting a war, burning through billions of dollars worth of interceptors faster than industry can replace them. The country that most urgently needs the Railgun is the same one that abandoned it. And the country closest to its actual deployment is Japan, which isn't fighting a single war and hasn't expended a single interceptor. Sometimes, to get back to the right decision, you first have to pay for the wrong one. Operation Epic Fury is just such a bill. Tens of billions of dollars, hundreds of interceptors, for each of which America paid 40 times more than the threat they destroyed. The Railgun didn't return because engineers suddenly found an elegant solution. It returned because the arithmetic of war made inaction more costly than resuming the program with an open end. This isn't a triumph of technology, it's a capitulation to economics. The New Mexico warehouse turned out not to be a place for obsolete equipment. It turned out to be a place for a question the Pentagon had no answer to until the war came calling.